This is XL 10 Minute Leaders Live. My name is Graham Brown. We're going to talk about leaders, leadership, and also navigating leadership in times of change, which is where we find ourselves today in what has been probably the most interesting, craziest 18 months that we've known in living memory. To help us do this and navigate that complex landscape, I'm joined by author Tim Sparks. Tim, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Graham. It's great to be here. Thank you.
Excellent to have you here. So, we have experienced a very strange, interesting, insert your adjective for the last 18 months.
Right.
Change has been of the order. It's been thrust upon us, hasn't it? So, hopefully, you can help us understand that in the context of leadership in the next 10 minutes. Talk about your book and your work as well. So, are you ready, Tim?
I'm ready to go.
Let's do this then. Business cards first. Do you have one? If you do, what does it say on your business card?
Well, I have a paper business card that has just the typical stuff on there, but I also have an e-business card that carries everything from my contact information to all my social networking, link up sites and all of that. So pretty standard
Okay.
stuff.
Under your name, what does it say? Leader, author, what would you class yourself as?
Well, I'm the president and CEO of Blue Ridge HR,
Hmm.
which is a company that I started a few years ago to um, kind of give me an umbrella to talk about all this kind of stuff and my speaking career and things like that.
Okay. Before we get to the book, let's talk about where we are today. So
Yeah.
in 2021, and the last 18 months has been, dare I say it, unprecedented. A word that gets used a lot, but it's true, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah, it really is.
dealing with people, leaders, what has changed for you and the world and the people that you deal with?
I guess the better question is what hasn't changed. We, as you said, we're in really kind of unprecedented times here, and the thing for me, not just how much things have changed over the past 18 months, but how much more they're going to change. We really don't know what the future looks like. We don't have really kind of the hope or ideal of going back to some semblance of normal, because we're not even sure what that means anymore. The world has changed so much that we really don't know what to expect in the next 18 months.
Well, what is the problem with that? Why is that an issue for business leaders?
Well, I think the biggest the biggest challenge for business leaders is as they try to lead people through these tough times of change is the understanding that for employees, for all of us, change tends to be emotional. It's not just, okay, things are different. Okay, we used to do it this way. Now we're doing it this way. Change is emotional, and it's been likened to, kind of the 6 stages of grief that people go through when they lose a loved one, right? When things change, people go through those stages of denial and depression and bargaining and all of that until they can come to acceptance. And that's the challenge for leaders, is to help your people get through that kind of dip in that emotional curve to try and bring them to acceptance of the new state.
I imagine a lot of this is, I mean, you say it's emotional, and therefore we need to communicate change in emotional ways. I mean, story has often been used as a great tool to help people navigate change. When you look at, for example, your world, history, society, do you point to great change leaders that we can all understand as a role model or example, or are they not out there? Are they more sort of the grassroots change leaders?
Well, I think the true change leaders are the ones that can build relationships with their people, and they're not, they're not those that just kind of sit in their ivory tower or in their office somewhere on the, corner office on the 100th floor or whatever. They're the leaders that actually have that ability to make an emotional connection with people. And if your people can trust you and if they can believe in you, then you can lead them through times of change. But until you bridge that gap and make that connection, it really becomes very difficult.
For yourself personally, working with leaders, what have you learned about them? Or let me rephrase that. What do you know about them now that you didn't know when you started your journey in this area? Those kind of revelations, those surprises, those experiences.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me as I work with CEOs and senior leaders in organizations, the biggest revelation for me was that, you kind of have this mindset that you think these leaders are these great, confident, dogmatic people, and yet for me at least, I see them as being very vulnerable, sometimes very just very unconfident, if that's even a word, but just kind of really insecure in a lot of ways. And it's important. One of the biggest mistakes I think leaders make is when they put together their leadership team, they tend to hire and promote people that think and act just like they do. And so then you have this kind of homogenous group that's leading this team, and there's really no diversity. There's no variance of thought in that group, and so you tend to kind of make the same mistakes over and over again because you're not vetting decisions correctly, and it kind of turns into this cycle of defeat and failure.
There's some great case studies, aren't there, out there about companies that are victims of their own success. Kodak,
Absolutely.
Nokia,
Yep.
even many Japanese tech companies, because they lacked that diversity of thought, they couldn't change. They weren't
Right.
receptive to change because those leaders had created a comfortable environment where people thought like them,
Yeah.
rather than the emperor's new clothes situation
Yeah.
where that kid calls you out. So hang on a second. That's not what
Yeah.
people want.
And even when new ideas are submitted to them and they're presented with ways to think outside the box and stretch, they tend to kind of recoil back into that comfort zone that they have, and they let opportunity pass them by. I think of Blockbuster Video and other organizations like that just had something hand delivered to them, and they just said no thanks, and ended up becoming
Didn't see it.
obscure.
Yeah, exactly. The famous case studies, Kodak were actually presented by one of their engineers, a digital camera in the
Yeah.
70s.
Yeah.
And they turned it down because their business was paper.
Yeah.
And look where they are today. All right, then. So, Tim, what I want to do is give you the stage, invite you to TED. We're going to have a very quick 2-minute TED talk. And you're going to get on the stage and talk about your book and tell us about what you'd want to talk about. If you had a TED Talk invite, and I think the talks are actually 12 to 18 minutes, but we only have 2 now. So unfortunately, this is going to be the concertina version. But if you only had 2 minutes, what would you talk about on stage that we could learn from?
I think, and I just got done speaking in Tampa on the most important thing. That was the title of my presentation. And for me, the most important thing in any organization is its culture. When you think about it, culture envelops and controls really everything else an organization does. And that's why, the great Peter Drucker said, culture eats strategy for breakfast. And I think what he meant by that is that you can have the greatest strategy in the world, and you can have the smartest people on the planet, creating strategy for you. But if you don't have that right culture, if you don't have the right people, enacting that culture, then really your strategy is worthless. And so to me, culture drives everything that we do as an organization, and it drives things like employee engagement. And I've had actually CEOs and leaders ask me, why is employee engagement so important? And if you look at the statistics and the surveys and the reports that have been done about employee engagement, employee engagement is such a huge driver of bottom line profitability. As a matter of fact, the Corporate Executive Board about 10 years ago did a study that said for every 1% decrease in in employee engagement, it costs the company $6.5 million for every $1 billion in revenue. So you don't have to be a math genius to know that that's a lot of money. So culture drives that engagement, and it drives things like recruiting and retention, and especially today in the atmosphere that we are operating in, recruiting is, it used to be very hard to find top talent. Now it's very hard to find anybody that wants to work. And so when you have a great culture, it makes your recruiting and retention policy that much easier. And so really, to me, it's all about culture. Your culture drives your organization. And the last quote I'll leave you with is, somebody said, your culture is shaped by the worst behavior that the leader is willing to tolerate.
Wow.
And to me, that speaks volumes.
Oh, yeah. I'm sure you've got people interested in finding out more about you, Tim. So where do we go?
Real easy. It's just timsparks.us. Or you can email me at tim@blueridgehr.com.
Fantastic. Tim, thank you for joining us on XL 10 Minute Leaders Live today.
I appreciate